Hey guys, welcome back to the channel. I'm Relix, and today we're going to go over the Kings' first quarter season review. Just like last year for the 2023-24 season, I will be going over the different quarters, so first quarter, half season, third quarter, and then of course the final season reviews as the Kings season goes along for the regular season, and then of course maybe even a playoff one if needed. But let's get started with a few things real quick. I have watched majority of the games. I've not watched all of the games. For example, the Maple Leafs 2-6 loss that we lost against the Maple Leafs. I did not watch that game. I was out, and unfortunately they lost, and the Kings lost, and there's no real reason for me to have watched that one. But I did actually find out as I was researching my stuff for this video that Phoenix Copley did come in relief of David Riddick for that game, so he did get a game played. Some of my things I've gotten here will not reflect that, but I will try to keep that in mind as well. But overall, going forward, this is just the first 20 games. Overall, I'm not exactly happy with the Kings' performance. That's just my opinion, of course. Everyone has their own opinions, but as far as what's going to be in this video, it's what I believe, what I think, and what I've seen. Other fans may have seen something different. Analysts may have a different opinion. These are just my opinions on how the Kings have played and what's going on as of right now. So if you guys have something different to say about anything I have to say, feel free to let me know in the comment section. But as of this game, as of the end of game 20, which was against the Buffalo Sabres, I think the Kings are just not in a good spot. We may be in a playoff spot as of this recording, but I don't consider us a top tier team in the league, and I will go over that real quick as well. So let's get started. To start off, I actually do want to start with the standings. So as you guys can see on the screen, I actually have both the wild card standings as well as the league standings up on the screen. Let's go over the wild card real quick. It's on the left side, of course. We have the LA Kings with 20 games played, a couple to few games more than other teams in the Western Conference, as you guys can see. We do sit in third in the Pacific Division, which is great. That's fantastic. However, if you guys really look at the points going down the list, Edmonton, they have the first wild card spot. They're right there as well. Same games played as us. But Vancouver has 2 down. And if they win even just one game, they will actually take the Pacific Division spot from us and will be kicked to the wild card. So as you guys can see, that's a huge problem. Then we also have Seattle down there. Even the Ducks, they're kind of hanging around as well. But you can also see Colorado is in the mix. They're outside of the wild card, in fact. But if they get into the wild card, then we will most likely get kicked out in the long run. So all these teams in the West are actually really, really close. But then if you go to the right side of the screen, and you look at the league standings, you don't really see the Western teams kind of dominating. You see a lot of the Eastern teams like Carolina, Washington, Toronto, New Jersey, New York, Florida, etc., etc., etc. And then, of course, the Central teams, who I don't count as part of our group. Because if you look at the left side again, the Central teams are just dominating. I mean, the third place Central team, Dallas Stars, have 24 points. That is matching the Golden Knights' 24 points. And the Dallas Stars have one less game played. So, as you guys can see, the Central is dominating compared to the Pacific. And therefore, that's a problem. The Kings are just not playing good enough hockey, and as per the norm, the West is usually weaker than the East, and that seems to be the same here into this year as well. Not to say that any team can't beat another team, but the Kings I would have liked to see pull ahead in some circumstances. There are a few games specifically against weaker teams that we should have been able to beat. Games such as the Sharks and the Blackhawks. We lost in a shootout to the Blackhawks, and we lost in regulation to the Sharks. And then, of course, the last game for Game 20 against the Buffalo Sabres, it was a 1-0 shutout against us. And so that was one of those games where the Kings needed to muster up an effort, and really make a comeback, because I believe we got 5 power plays. How many was that? Yeah, 5 power plays in the Buffalo game, and we didn't score a single one. So, unfortunately, the Sabres did. They scored 1 on the power play out of 3, and that was the game-deciding goal. So, it's games like that that really need to, the Kings need to pick it up. Can't be losing 1-goal games, yet alone 1-0. So, we need to be able to score. We need to be able to work as a team and make comebacks happen. Other games that I feel like, I'll get into it later as well, the power plays and PKs, but other games where the power play would have changed the outcome of a game was the 1-2 overtime loss against Boston. Early on, we had a 5 power play game there, but we didn't score on any of them. The 1-6 loss against the Vegas Golden Knights, we 1-6. We lost for sure, but we got 4 power play opportunities on there, and we let them score 2 on us. And unfortunately, we didn't get any. So that's something that needed to change. Again, the San Jose game where we lost 2-4 in regulation, PK was perfect, but the power play 0 for 6. So once again, a weak team. Sharks are one of the bottom teams in the league, and unfortunately, we couldn't beat them. And then the only other game besides the Buffalo game that mattered was the Vancouver loss 2-4. We had 4 power play opportunities, and we didn't score on any of them. So as you guys can see from the scores, relatively speaking, it's very close games. And the power play, even just 1 power play goal to 2 power play goals, would have made a huge difference, especially since we're getting multiple opportunities. But again, like I said, I'll get into that stuff later on. Okay, so let's now go over the point leaders. And from left to right, as you guys can see on the screen, point leaders from top to bottom. Anze Kopitar still leading the team in points, 21 points total, followed by Adrian Kempe, 18, Lafreniere, 15, Moore, 13, and Brent Clark, 13. Those are your top 5. Kind of a surprise to see Lafreniere up there, I won't lie. He is probably my biggest surprise on the season, probably. Like I said in my season review from last year, I did not think Lafreniere did a very good job coming in as a rookie. Yeah, he played 82 games. That's great. But he did not play to the expectations that I felt like if you're going to come into the lineup, you need to show that you're an NHL player. I didn't think he did that last year, but so far this year, he has gone above and beyond my expectations, and he's doing really well. Someone who's disappointing for me, who has only started to pick up, is Trevor Moore. He's tied for 4th on the team in points, 13 points. However, that's kind of misleading because that's only 3 goals. And last year, he was our leading goal scorer with 30, I think it was. So that's very disappointing. His defense has been pretty bad this year. Not going to lie. And then, of course, like I said, just in the past couple weeks has he been able to turn his season around a little bit. He had that point streak going and everything, so that's great. But before that, pretty much from when the season started to the end of October, he was not producing much at all, and that's something that is a huge detriment to the team. Moore is one of those top 6 forwards who needs to be producing. And you guys can see who's in 6th place, Kevin Fiala. He's also another guy who needs to be producing as well. Only 12 points on the season, 6 on the team. He's usually one of our top 3. So it's kind of unfortunate to see that he's in the 6th spot. And it's only 12 points in 20 games on the season. I know Fiala didn't play all 20 games, but that's something that he needs to change. Now, granted, I will give him a slight benefit of the doubt. Unfortunately, the Kings do not trust Fiala, and I won't lie, I wouldn't even be surprised if Fiala gets traded at some point during his tenure with the Kings. I think it's clear that Jim Hiller does not like Kevin Fiala. He benches him quite often, in fact, including the game against the San Jose Sharks where we lost. He was a healthy scratch. And that was a huge mistake, because not only did we lose and look like total idiots, like I'm not even joking, that game was just a bunch of amateur Kings players playing on the ice with an NHL Sharks team. That's what it was. And that was probably the worst game of the season, without a doubt. But Fiala was scratched for that game because of taking a couple penalties in the game prior, in which, to me, wasn't even his fault for one of them. And yet, he was benched the rest of the third period. I think it was the Wild game. I think it was against the Minnesota Wild. He was benched the rest of the game in the third period, and then scratched the next game against the Sharks. Of course, after that, put him back in the lineup. Of course, he comes out and he scores, and against the Golden Knights, I believe. So, my opinion is you can't scratch one of your best players, regardless that he's taking penalties. You have to have him out there because the rest of the team ain't doing it. I'm not going to look at the right side of the screen and think, oh yeah, those guys are going to definitely be game changers. They're going to make sure you win games. No, it's Kevin Fiala who's going to be a game changer. And unfortunately, I don't think Jim Hiller sees that. And I think it's a huge mistake that he has the power to scratch and or bench his players. I get it, he's the head coach, but not all of his decisions have been great. And I think that was definitely one of them. Someone who is kind of a little bit of a surprise is Foegele. He's been able to score some goals this year. First year with the Kings, of course. I'm a little sad because we don't have Lizotte now because of that. But he is around. He is playing good, pretty much good two-way game. Like, I would say, out of all the Kings, he might be the most consistent King on the team this year so far. He has both shown some offense and some defense. He plays PK, and so he's doing pretty good as far as overall performance. I just wish he would just go above and beyond just a little bit more to try and help us win games. Like I said before in the standings, there are games where we're just kind of hanging off the wins and losses just because of 1-goal games. Someone like him, he could be a game changer. He can play a little bit harder. I think his game's a little bit, underrated per se, and so I don't think we use him to his full potential. But that's just my opinion. Going down the list again on the right side now, Quinton Byfield, 9 points. Unfortunately, that is bad. He just signed a new contract, a hefty contract no less, for a long term, coming off a career season no less, where I acknowledge that Byfield was probably the best player on the team last year, and now he is not. That is something that is just really bad. I do believe that is only 2 goals and 7 assists, so that is pretty atrocious. And honestly, watching him play, he kind of looks pathetic. Compared to last year, where I felt like he was doing everything right, this year he's trying too hard. He tries to do a lot of rush chances by himself. He doesn't pass off to the right players, and he just causes a lot of turnovers. Even though he's playing with Foegele and Laferriere on the third line, and those two are scoring, Byfield is not. And so I'm quite disappointed in his performance, and I hope that he can turn around for the rest of the season. But we'll see how things go. Right now, it's just really not clicking with him. He is centering that third line. At times, he is moved up to play with Kopi and Kempe, where he played last year. But right now, there's just no perfect fit. And I think he's one of the reasons why the Kings are struggling. And I think he, too, just like Fiala, can be a game changer. I actually skipped over Brent Clark, by the way. He has taken over as the main offensive defenseman for the team, which I think is fantastic that he is getting the opportunity. I don't really trust him. Like I acknowledged last year, he isn't exactly great. However, he is proving to be kind of efficient. He does lead the D in points. So 13 points in 20 games, that's not bad for him. Considering that all of his prior seasons, he hardly got any points and hardly showed any potential. But this year, I definitely see a lot more confidence, making a lot of mistakes still, and taking penalties, which I'll get into later, but he is doing better, and I think that's really good. Then going down to Gavrikov, who is 10th in points. Gavrikov, he's taken over as the number 1 defenseman on the team, which is an idiot idea, no offense, but I don't like Gavrikov. I didn't like him when he came to the... I only liked him when he came to the team that season when we traded for him, and he played great. last year and then going to now this year, I don't think he's good enough. His contract is way too expensive for what he's doing. As I mentioned in last year's review, he is a great neutral zone defender. Always preventing breakouts from the offensive or the enemy's defensive zones, and defending our blue line. That's great. But once against the defensive zone, things start to collapse and he kind of gets lost. And I think the same thing applies to this year. He may lead in the plus-minus category for the team, but we have to keep in mind he doesn't play any power play time, nor does he play empty net situations. And so, of course, his plus-minus is going to be high because he's not the one who's suffering from not being able to score goals. So, unfortunately, I can't give Gavrikov much credit that he is up there in the points. For someone who is getting Doughty's time on ice, you better be, up there in the points. You have to be. Because if you're not, then there's something wrong. And then his partner, Mikey Anderson, only has 1 point less. He's a defensive D. And yet, he's actually doing a pretty good job on his own as well. And Mikey's not expected to go out and score. Gavrikov is. So, I'm a little disappointed to see that, Gavrikov hasn't stepped up to a bigger role, considering that he has taken majority of Doughty's ice time while he is out. But that's just my opinion. Again, it could be biased. Maybe I'm just not a fan of Gavrikov, sure. But I'm not seeing it for the contract expenses. And then, of course, if you guys also know, Joel Edmondson, who is 13th on the team in points, he also only has 6 points. A couple of them are goals, yes, but rather 3 of them are goals. But unfortunately, it's not worth the price that we paid for him. And it's just not worth it. And unfortunately, he's not exactly helping the team win either. So, going down the list even more, Turcotte, Spence, Jeannot, sure, they got some points, but there's just not enough. The trust that the Kings are putting into Turcotte is just ridiculous. 5 points, it's not enough. I know he was injured, but again, that's also why I didn't like him. He's very frail. He doesn't provide any offensive, power going into the rushes and stuff like that. He gets hurt way too easily. And so I don't think he's a great fit for the Kings. Unfortunately, we need to replace him. Same thing with Spence. Unfortunately, dude, you got to step up. I like Spence as a person for sure, but he needs to be able to score. He is the second offensive defenseman on our team under Brant Clark. Power play, empty net, Spence is the one who comes up next besides Clark, and Spence is not doing that this season, so I'm very disappointed to see his production. And then, of course, Tanner Jeannot has 3 points. I wish that was a little bit higher, but he has spent time suspended as well as just spending too much time in the penalty box. Again, as I mentioned in my preseason preview of the season for this year, if Jeannot can score like he did in Nashville, then he would be a great asset. The assets we traded away and what we got paid to get him would be great. But as of right now, he is sticking to the stupid grinding game on the fourth line, and that's sad. Because if you're playing the fourth line, if anything, you should be more skilled than those guys. But unfortunately, he's resulted to the grinding game, which is very disappointing. So that's the points. I'm going to move on to the goals real quick as well. I'm not going to go over assists, but you guys can probably get the gist of the idea from the assists. As you guys can see now, goals. Kempe leads, or rather is tied with Lefebvre with 9. That's kind of disappointing to me. By now, after 20 games, I would think that Kempe would have at least double digits, but he does not. Same thing with Fiala. He only has 7. That is something that is of concern for me going forward. One second. Let me write my notes. In which, yes, okay, so Fiala only has 7 goals on the season. 4 of those are power play goals. Kempe has 1 power play, 1 shorthand. So, first of all, that's an error for Kempe to only have 1 power play goal, considering that he is constantly the shooter on the power play. That is a huge mistake. Stop using Kempe on the power play. He misses way too much. We need to fix that. We need to use either Fiala or Kopi. Then you go down to Warren Fogle here, 6 goals. That's great, actually. 6 of his 10 points, that is. Kopitar, 5 goals. Of course, he only had a hat trick in the first game, and ever since then, only 2 goals. That's kind of lackluster as far as goal scoring production, and we get it. Kopi's a playmaker. He likes to pass, but he has a way better shot than he thinks. And I think he should use that more often. He needs to shoot more, but unfortunately, he just doesn't shoot enough, and he doesn't get enough credit for that. Moore has 3, Lewis has 3, Mikey has 3, Edmondson has 3. It's great to see that we're getting goals from defensemen, but unfortunately, it's not enough. These guys aren't, for example, Mikey and Edmondson, they're not the ones who should be goal scoring. It should be the next guys, Clark, Gavrikov, Spence. Those guys are the ones who should be scoring goals. Unfortunately, they're not. They're not shooting enough, and they're not getting the puck through. And so you continue down the list, you get Byfield, Jeannot, Deneau, Turcotte. They all have 1 or 2 goals. That's just not enough, especially for Byfield. He needs to have more. He just signed that big contract. If you're going to be the future of the Kings, you need to score goals. Same thing with Deneau. I don't care that he's the defensive center. He needs to score goals. He gets all of his goals with the front net presence. And go back, his 1 goal, front net presence. But where is he always? Not in the front net anymore. He does not go there as much as he should. And yet, majority of his goals with the Kings in his career have been in front of the net. And yet, he does not do that. In fact, I mentioned it even last year. The Kings are probably the worst front net presence team in the entire league. We do not go to the front net to pick up rebounds or, tip shots, deflect, redirect, none of that. We love to do the sniping, or we love to do the perfect plays, the perfect shots, and that needs to change right now. The Kings don't have enough goals. I mean, these are your goal leaders after 20 games, and no one has double digits. We need to pick it up. If not, pick it up for the top guys. Some of the bottom guys need to start scoring too. Okay, so real quick, I know I should have went over this actually first, but I'm going to backtrack a little bit. As you guys can see here, we have the Kings forwards for the first 20 games. First line, that's usually the kind of pairings that we want. Turcotte with Kopi and Kempe. Second line, Fiala, Deneau, Moore. Third line, Fogo, Byfield, and Lefebvre. That third line is the only line on the season that has remained 100% consistent, besides the occasional Byfield moves to first line left wing, and then Lewis would most likely take on third line center, when the game, of course, comes to the third periods and we are starting to shorten the bench. Otherwise, these lines have been most consistent, exception with Turcotte being out and in of the lineup. The fourth line, as you guys can see, I've listed 5 guys down there. Even Turcotte would actually list down there as well, but for the sake of keeping it simple, Jeannot always on the bottom, except for when he was suspended. We got Hellenius, who just came up recently. Trevor Lewis, who will always be on the fourth line, and the occasional top, who move up and down the lineup because he is the most reliable player as far as consistency besides Fogle. Akil Thomas, who has been scratched half of the season, and then of course Andre Lee, who is now back in Ontario, and in my opinion should not have been with the team from the get-go. And this is your forward core that we've had throughout the season. I'm a little disappointed. Turcotte. Turcotte's one of those guys who I don't think should have been on the team anyways, because he's very, very weak. He gets injured way too easily. But Akil Thomas, he showed off a lot of potential at the end of last season, and we didn't play him in the playoffs either. And so I was hoping that he would get some time this year. Unfortunately, not only was he scratched half the season already, but he also, when he did get the ice time, he didn't show off the skills I saw at the end of last year. Maybe it's because he wasn't warmed up throughout the season during his time with Ontario, but he didn't show off his talents, and so he's a kind of a disappointment to me. The other huge disappointment is Andre Lee. I didn't think he should have made it out of training camp. Personally, I think there are other candidates who played way better than Lee did during the preseason. I know the the Kings broadcast crew like Fox and Stoll, they praise Lee and all his plays, but I personally didn't see it. I thought Andre Lee was not a top performer in the preseason. Just because he played in more games doesn't make him a better player. And so he made out training camp, but he did nothing for the Kings this year. And I think that's kind of a mistake to have played him in the first place. But this is your core for your forwards. Let's move on to the D. As you guys can see, I listed it slightly different, but the two goaltenders, Kemper and Riddick, they basically played the majority of the season. As I mentioned before, I actually made this diagram here without Copley in it because I didn't know Copley actually played a game. He also just came in relief, so it's not like he did play games. But as far as your D core is concerned, we have Mikey Anderson and Gavrikov. Gavrikov playing the right D in Doughty's spot as a left-handed D. Edmondson with Brent Clark. And then, of course, Spence on the bottom line with whoever comes in as an extra replacement. It was constantly changed out throughout the season. Honestly, this is probably the weakest D-core I've seen in the Kings since I started watching hockey. And it is sad to say, man. As you guys can see from the list of switches, Caleb Jones, who I hate, shouldn't have been on the team. He is now injured, and he has a -2 on the season, which is one of the Kings' worst, plus-minus wise. So he sucks, and I wish we never had him in the first place. England, he was here last year, played all 82 games. I thought his game was fine. I think he should have been the guy who just stays in consistently, but he's not trusted, apparently, by the Kings. Moverari, who got a couple games before the 20 games played mark. He's okay, but another guy who, again, was relied upon when we had injuries a few seasons ago when players like Dursey came up and played and took over the role as number one over for Doughty, who was injured. Mikey Anderson was injured. I think Roy was injured too. Walker. Those guys were all injured, and so these guys came up. Bjornfoot, Moverari, Spence, they were the next guys. Moverari was just kind of forgotten. And so I think he should have been up as well instead of getting someone like Edmondson signed. And then, of course, there's Kyle Burrows. Hasn't played recently. I guess they just don't trust his game either. Overall, all of them kind of suck in their own way. They definitely don't provide any offense, that's for sure. And that's something that needs to change going forward for the Kings D-core. But like I said, overall, I am not a fan of this D-core. The goalies are fine. I have no problems with any of the goalies. None whatsoever. But it's the team in front of them that sucks. And the D-core is one of the biggest reasons. So, going forward, those top four, Mikey Anderson, Gavrikov, Edmondson, Clark, those four specifically, they need to pick it up. They need to be a top four D-core more than ever. Because if they don't pick it up, the Kings aren't going to make playoffs. Right now, we're in an okay spot, but that's just because the Pacific sucks right now. As teams start to get it going, it's only going to get harder to win games, and they're going to be winning games too. So if we don't start winning more games now, then we're not going to make playoffs. That's just my opinion. All right, moving on. Let's talk about the Kings plus-minus leaders. So as you guys can see on the screen, like I mentioned before, Gavrikov actually leads the plus-minus, followed by Mikey Anderson, Turcotte, Foegele, Lafreniere. Those are your top five for the team. Obviously, your top D pair with plus 12 and 10. That's only natural. Your top D pair should be higher, especially with Mikey Anderson there as our defensive D. But like I said, I'll get into that a little bit later. Turcotte, he missed some games, so he was part of the crew that was producing early on in the season. So his plus minus didn't get affected as much as other players did. Foegele and Lafreniere are up there with a plus 7 each. That is to be expected because they are scoring. That third line has been the most consistent as far as throughout the most of the season scoring. And so, of course, they're going to have a high plus minus. And I think their defense is actually pretty solid as well. Next up is the next tier. Kempe, Kopi, Edmondson, and Deneau, 6, 5 through 3. And honestly, that's great for Kempe and Kopi. And we have to keep in mind that They play in all situations: power play, PK, even strength, and specifically empty net situations. And I've mentioned it last year. Kings are one of the worst teams in empty net situations, both goals for and goals against. And so, yeah, it's only expected that Kempe, Kopi will probably get scored on, get minuses because of the empty net situations. And that has been the case this year as well. So their plus minus is not a great reflection of how they're performing. And in all honesty, plus minus isn't as 100% important when it comes to players like them in the middle tiers as much as it does when we get to the bottom and the top tiers, right? Like I said, in the top, Gavrikov, for example, and Mikey Anderson, yeah, they have the team leading plus minus. However, both of them actually don't play empty net situations, nor do they both play power play. So we've had a couple shorthanded goals against this year. That's minuses for everyone on the power play. And then, of course, empty net situations, both of them don't play that. And so, of course, they're not going to get minuses. I mean, if you take out about all the empty net situations considered, at least -5 probably on the season. At least 5 empty net goals scored against us, I'm pretty sure. Flip-flop the numbers. Kobe is all of a sudden a +10, and then, of course, Mike Anderson is always at -5. Makes you think, right? So there is a huge difference in plus-minus stats, and unfortunately, I don't use it to really, question into whether or not the player is doing great or not, unless you have been watching the games yourself. You won't really understand what the plus minus truly means to each player. But for the most part, the middle tier guys, such as Fogel, Lefebvre, Kempe, and Kopi, those are actually good reflections of what they're doing on the season, and I think that's really good representation. Of course, I did not include all the middle guys who have like 2 to even ratings, but you guys can also see on the bottom there is people with minuses, and not specifically for England, Jeannot, who have -1s because they haven't played all the games, right? Jeannot's on the 4th line as well. Of course, it's expected he might get scored on too, and not to mention he's spending a lot of time in the penalty box. But Byfield being down there with a -1, that's not good. Again, he does play empty net situations. However, that also means he's not scoring enough offensively. So he centers the 3rd line with Fogel and Lefebvre. How can they have pluses if he has a minus? He is not doing enough offensively to keep his plus minus, at least at an even rating. So he needs to definitely step it up a little bit more, as I mentioned already throughout this video. So that's something to keep in mind. And then there's Caleb Jones -2. I mentioned that before. Again, I don't think his talents were even needed in the organization. It was a mistake to sign him, and so I'm not surprised that he has a -2. But he's injured now, so it's not like he could get any worse right now. But then there's the bottom two. Andre Lee -5 and Kevin Fiala -6. Now, Kevin Fiala is a special case, I would say. One, he takes penalties. So when the Kings get scored on the PK, he gets the minus. And I know for a fact that he has been taking a lot of penalties, and we do get scored on. Our PK is not great, and I will go over the PK and power play later. But Fiala -6, that's bad. He has a trend ever since he came to the Kings of having a bad plus minus, but team leading minus, that's just really bad. He needs to play a little bit more defensively, be more disciplined, and go out and score more. Like I said, he's only 6 on the team in points. He needs to score a little bit more, especially since we consider him a top 6 forward, who should be in our top 5 at least. Andre Lee with a -5. Again, you're coming in as a rookie. The Kings trusted you throughout the preseason. I didn't, and this plus minus is an example of it. He got scored on way too much, way too many mistakes. That's why he's not playing right now, and he was loaned back to Ontario. So it was a huge mistake to have Lee in the first place. I don't think he belonged on the team, at least not yet. So it's good that he got sent back down. So if he ever does come back up, hopefully he's learned and he can produce at a better rate than he has been. I mean, just like Byfield, he's a big, strong body who doesn't actually use his body, uses his stick more. He needs to be able to circumvent that and, be able to hit. That's one thing that Byfield didn't do before, but is doing now. Andre Lee, same thing. He needs to learn to hit, use his body first, and then play the puck efficiently, not turn it over. And so this is one of those cases where plus minus definitely shows and is attached to the player significantly. But of course, that's just my opinion. Like I said, analysts and everyone, the broadcast crews and other fans, they liked Lee. I personally, I do not like Lee on the team. He just doesn't fit right now. I'm glad that he got a chance, but he needs to learn to be an NHL player, and I think he needs more time in the AHL to do that. So that's what I think, at least. Next up, we have the Kings time on ice leaders. This is average time on ice per game. And as I mentioned earlier in the video, Gavrikov leads the team with 23:15. He has taken the majority of Doughty's ice time. As you guys can see, he leads the team by a good couple minutes, too, to Mikey Anderson, 21:46. So, as you guys can see, there's a huge difference in time from Gavrikov last season to this season. And one of the biggest surprises to me is the fact that he is playing left-handed on the right side. Who does that remind you guys of? I wonder. Sounds like Sean Durzi playing the right hand on the left side for the Kings. And he was actually scoring. Quite interesting. Anyways, moving on. Then we got Edmondson 2044, Clark 1912, and 1818 for Spence. That's your demon time on ice. Then we got the forwards. Kopi playing 19 minutes. That's normal. Kempe just below 19 as well. Dano 17, second line center. Byfield getting 17 minutes. He plays in all situations this year, both power play, PK, and then of course even strength and empty net situations. And then of course Kevin Fiala 17 minutes as well. So time on ice, the forwards are expected time on ice perfectly. The D's, that's where it gets a little weird. I was expecting Clark to have a bigger role, but unfortunately they trust Gavrikov so much that they're playing him way more than everyone else, which I think is a huge mistake. But that's just my opinion. So, time on ice, important, but not largely important for the team. Just goes to show who's playing and who's not. But, that's just, take from it what you will. I just personally think the D need to switch up their roles a little bit more. I think we're playing a little too much of Edmondson and Gavrikov and not enough Clark and Spence. So, who knows? Maybe I'm wrong. Next up is the Kings penalties in minutes leaders, PIMS. So first, I'm going to go over these special cases. Tanner Jeannot, 36 penalty minutes to lead the Kings. He is tied for 4th in total penalty minutes in the league. However, that is because of a fight / a match penalty, which I actually wrote game misconduct. It was actually a match penalty. He's had fights and a match penalty with only 3 minor penalties. So 6 penalty minutes of the 36 are minors. No problem there. I have, no complaints. Everyone takes penalties. It's going to happen. So him only having 3 minors, that's actually fantastic. So give credit to him for doing his job in fights and, being physical on the ice. There is no doubt that he is probably the most physical player on our team. And I think he's done a really well job at that. Even though I don't want him to play the grinding game, he actually does it really well. Next up is Kyle Burrows with 20 penalty minutes. He has 2 fights, which equals for half of his penalties. So he does have 5 minors, which is part of the most undisciplined category. Unfortunately, that is very, very disappointing to see. However, he doesn't get as much ice time. So it's one of those where I can't punish him too much because he doesn't play a lot. But at the same time, 5 minor penalties in the games he has played, a little too many. So it's kind of a give and take. But overall, I'm not disappointed in his game. I just wish he would be a little bit more, put in a little bit more effort trying to be offensive. I know he's defensive, but, we need the D-core to step up. And that means everybody. Next up is Andreas Englund, 12 penalty minutes. He has 2 fights and 1 minor penalty. That's perfect for what he does. Again, he hasn't played all the games, so that's actually perfect for where he is. But as you guys can see, he rates, 1, 2, 3, 4, 5. 5th on the team. Sorry, 6th on the team in penalty minutes, but no problem there. I think that's perfectly fine. Then you go to the middle category. This is your most undisciplined players, per se. So Clark, who has played all the games, he has the most minor penalties on the team with 9. That is 18 penalty minutes. Followed by Fiala with 8 minor penalties. That's 16. Edmondson, 7 minor penalties. That's 14 penalty minutes. And then, of course, there's Andre Lee, who has 11 penalty minutes, which is 3 minors and 1 fight. However, again, he is a rookie. He shouldn't come in and make all these mistakes, which will put his team down, right? He doesn't get as much ice time, so where he is making the mistakes, our top players are, they have to make up for his mistakes. And unfortunately, that means PK, where he does not play. So things like that is why he's the most undisciplined. He just inconsistent and just doesn't help the team in any way. And for the amount of games he has played, that's really bad. And then, of course, you have the other followers, each with 5 minor penalties each, for a total of 10 penalty minutes each. Kempe, Byfield, and Mikey Anderson. Again, we're going to take penalties. I get that. There's no problem with that. I don't mind. But when it's your top guys taking penalties, it sucks. Especially since all 3 do play in all situations. It kind of puts your team down when you can't go on the power play and then you have them out there. Or if you go and you take a penalty with them, all of a sudden your best defenseman in Mike Anderson is out. Or one of your best PKers and Adrian Kempe is out. Or someone who is trying to learn everything in Quinton Byfield for our future is out. It's just a huge detriment, and I think that's something that these 3 specifically need to keep in mind when, taking penalties, especially when it's dumb penalties in the offensive zone that shouldn't have been taken or something like that. Overall, I'm not actually surprised by the penalty minute leaders here, but you would think that the middle guys would maybe, tone it down a little. Specifically Clark, he took a lot of penalties to start the season. He's been a little bit more disciplined as the 20-game mark came along, but Fiala, same thing. He hasn't taken a penalty, I think, in like 5 games straight now. So that's great. But yeah, overall, we gotta stay out of the box. Kings take a lot of penalties this year. And I'll get into the power play and PK later, again, percentages and everything like that. But as far as penalties taken, where's my list? Kings have taken 69 penalties this year, and we've only killed 55 of them. So that's unfortunate, because that's not good enough. So that's something we need to keep in mind going forward as we go into the video and we discuss the power play and PK. Alright, next, let's go over the Kings face-offs real quick. Very short, outlook of how the season has been going for, of course, the centerman. Obviously, Kopi's going to take the majority of the face-offs, as you guys can see. I have the face-offs taken, face-offs won, face-off percentage. And as a little side note, 14th in the league for Kopi, his 56.8. There are a lot of centermen right now who have a 60% face-off percentage. So that's actually really nice that Kopi is still 14th in the league with a 56.8. Dano's not too far behind him with 53.5, having taken about 71 less face-offs. It's not too bad. I think that's actually really efficient, considering that the start of the season, both Kings centermen were actually below 50% for the first so many games. I forget how many. So it's good to see that they have both made a huge comeback and are now kind of top of the league centermen. Then you go and you lose everything. Byfield, 48.2%. On his face-offs, being the third-line center. Trevor Lewis, 48.2% as the fourth-line center. And Turcotte, who occasionally as well took this center job as well. For example, when Byfield moved to wing. So, these are your main 5 centermen. All 5 of these guys have at least taken, as you guys can see from Turcotte, 73 plus. But if you guys want even more details, that's actually everyone else on the team who has taken faceoffs are either 27 faceoffs taken or lower. So I didn't include them. People like Moore taking a couple, Fiala taking a few. People who aren't naturally centers but can do the job a little bit here and there. I didn't include them because there's no point. Like Hellenius as well, he came in as a centerman as well. However, just not enough sample size for me to really want to put him in there as well. So these are your 5 main centermen who have done the job this year so far in the first 20 games. And as my note says, outside of Turcotte, who has played center and wing through various games, all individuals' face-off percentages are technically up from last year, from the end of last year. So specifically speaking about Byfield, Lewis, and Turcotte, who all had lower percentages, they're now higher. So it's actually good to see, especially for Byfield. Yeah, it's still below 50%, but for a guy who is now transitioning back to centerman from wing last year, I think it's good. It's good that he's starting to get his percentage up. And if he can get to the 50 at least, that'd be great. But again, face-offs, yes, they're important throughout a game, but it's in the circumstances of the game that they matter. So as looking from an outside perspective at the whole total value of the face-offs, these numbers don't matter to me. Unless it's like Kopi, who is in the top of the league. And of course, he's known for being really good centerman, right? So it's only natural that he's in the top. But overall, looking at these numbers, it's circumstantial. You need the face-offs wins when they matter. In the defensive zone, on the PK, in the offensive zone, on the power play, etc., etc., etc. So it's game time moments that matter. These numbers here, they don't matter as much. So I'm not going to complain too much about what they look like. Going forward, let's move into the Kings goalies. That's the final statistics on the season. As you guys can see, we did play 3 goalies, Kuemper, Riddick, and Copley. And again, as you guys can see on the screen, Copley with 1 game played versus Toronto does not go against his record of a loss for the Kings because he replaced David Riddick in the game. But he did still get 2 goals against out of the 6, as well as an 83.3 save percentage in that game. But otherwise, Kuemper was our main starter for the season. At least that was the expectation. Unfortunately, due to 2 now injuries, in which he is now currently on injury reserve, Riddick has taken 1 extra game over Kuemper. So as you guys can see from the stats, Riddick has a better goals against average, but a slightly lower save percentage than Kuemper. I think Kemper's done a pretty solid job or otherwise. He has had 3 overtime losses, 2 being overtime, 1 being shootout. So I can't really blame him because these are close games. And as I mentioned before, Kings need to put in more effort scoring-wise, specifically on the power play. And, those 1-goal games could be the difference. They could be the difference. I get one of them was the Ottawa Senators game where we actually lost 7-8 in overtime. But, a couple goals here and there in each other games makes a huge difference. It takes less effort off your goalies who basically, they're your most important player on the ice every game. The goalies are. They play the entire game unless injured or replaced, So they are always putting their best effort on the line. It's the Kings forwards and D-core that I'm more upset about. Goaltending, just like last year, even under Todd McClellan's reigns, I didn't think the goaltending was ever an issue. Same thing here under Jim Hiller. Goaltending, to me, is not an issue whatsoever, and I think the Kings just need to play better in front of them. Stats aren't exactly the highest, but the goals against average being lower than 3s, considering the save percentages, I think that's actually fantastic. So that's just my opinion. I just think the Kings need to do a better job playing in front of their goalies. Alright, and lastly but not least, as far as statistics go, here is the Kings' power play and PK stats. Okay, so we'll start with the power play. So this is probably the biggest detriment to the Kings right now on the season. It is the power play. So, real quick, you guys can see from the screen, I put up the units, the power play units, the left one being led by Kopitar, that's the first unit, and then of course the second unit being led by Deneau on the right. That's usually how they would like to play their forwards and defensemen. Usually, Kings play 4 forwards and 1 D, with Clark being the D on the first, Spence being the D on the second. However, in recent games, we've actually played 5 forwards. Instead of Clark on the D on the first unit, Byfield would take that spot, and then Clark and Spence would run the second unit. But it's give and take. But for the most part, throughout the most of the year, these are your units. And as you guys can see from the bottom left corner, 9 out of 63 on the power play. For 29th in the league with a 14.3%. Last year we had a 22.6 to end the year, which is way higher. And I get it, the Kings aren't going to be the best power play in the league or anything like that, but considering that it's 9 out of 63 attempts on the power play, give and take obviously some that are like shortened because of penalties taken, or shortened penalties from your guy coming out of the box. So let's just say even if it was 50, let's just take off 13 and make it even. 9 out of 50, that's not a lot. That's pretty bad, if I'm being honest. You guys can see here, this is everybody. Power play goal leaders and power play point leaders. This is everybody on the team. I didn't miss anybody. Fiala has 4, Clark has 2, Kempe, Lefebvre, and Kopi all each have 1 goal on the season for power play. That's not good enough. First of all, Kempe's being only 1. He misses the net way too often. He needs to score on the power play. We either need to switch him out and have Fiala or Kopitar do the one time on the right side of the ice, or Kempe needs to hit the net. And we need to get rebounds or something, because that is pretty abysmal to me, in my opinion. Not to mention, if you guys see the numbers, power play goal leaders, only the first unit has ever scored a power play goal. If you guys go to the power point leaders, outside of Spence's 1 power play point, which he probably got playing with the top line because of Clark, changing out or something, everyone who has a point on the power play is from the first unit. The second unit has literally 0 points on the power play. So, note to self, don't trust the second unit to get it done. They won't do it. Now, granted to say, maybe it's because they haven't had the chance to do it. That may be true. Second unit usually only gets like 20 seconds to work with because the first unit's always on the ice. I get it. And, maybe that's the trick. Maybe we need to literally switch things up. Switch the players up. I don't know. But right now, it is not working. Kopi leads the power play points with 8, Fiala 7. Of course, 4 of the 7 is Fiala's goals. Clark 6, Kempe 3, Lefebvre 2, and Spence 1. This is a horrible production for your power play. 29th in the league. We're lucky to be in the top 12 in the NHL standings, to be honest, with this kind of power play. If this could at least get to average, to 16th, middle in the league, honestly, we could be one of the best teams in the league right now. But unfortunately, the Kings just don't know what to do. Honestly, the power play is probably the biggest disaster on the team right now. Every game, I'm like, oh great, we got a power play. Woo. It's not even going to score. Like, I don't trust it to score. That's how bad it is. Like, I don't get excited. I'm like, it's just a waste of time. We had way more momentum when we didn't have the power play. So, things need to change. I don't know who's running the power play, but they need to change the system, change the players. I don't know. Something needs to change. Watch the Oilers. Look how they do their power play. It's amazing watching McDavid and Draisaitl go to work. Oh my god. I would love to see the Kings do a power play like that. In any case, that's the power play. Let's move on to the PK. So, same thing. I'm a little disappointed in the PK. 16th in the league, 79.7%. Last year, the Kings were second best in the league, barely under first place, so they had 84.6%. They were really good last year, but now you guys can see that it's really bad. We've only killed 55 of 69 total penalties. Yeah, obviously, again, give or take a few that are just taken away. So, I can't really put that into perspective, but even if you were bringing it down to 63, we still need to do a little bit better. But shorthand, I'm not expecting us to score shorthanded goals, but we did get a couple. Moore and Kempe both got 1 each. You guys can also see who assisted on their plays as well. Obviously, Kopi assisted Kempe's, Deneau assisted Moore's. I forget who Gavrikov assisted, but those are your shorthand point leaders. And then, of course, I put the units up as well. Typical, you want Adrian Kempe with Andrzej Kopitar, Deneau with Moore, Fogel, and Byfield. That's your third PK pair. Defense, Mikey with Gavrikov, Edmondson with Clark, Spence, whoever comes in. Again, I mentioned that already in the decors. Basically whoever plays. But for the most part, this is your PK units. I have no real complaints about who's playing the PK. It's just a matter of getting it done. And unfortunately, this is a huge step back because last year, as I mentioned multiple times throughout my reviews, and of course I stressed it out a lot, Blake Lizotte and Trevor Lewis was the best PK duo on the team, and now they're no longer a duo. Yet alone, Lewis, plays PK. Yes, he can actually slot in for any of the three units, but without Lizotte there, who was the best PKer on the team in my opinion, obviously you guys can see that the numbers are down. And if Lizotte not being there isn't a huge indication, then I don't know what is. I mean, it is clear as night and day that this is not the same PK crew as it was last year. Now, granted, of course, Doughty's out too, but Lizotte was one of the best PKers. He did not get scored on only a couple times, I think, throughout the regular season. That's it. So, I think this was a huge downgrade as far as, PK potential, and it's sad that we had to let Lizotte go. I really think that was a huge mistake. So, but overall, PK, it's middle of the league. It's still only 20 games. So, by the halfway mark, at game 41, I am expecting the Kings to get this PK number up a little bit, at least to above average. But we'll see how things go. As of right now, I'm not going to complain too much. It's just the fact that the Kings have to go on the PK so much because, as I mentioned, 69 penalties. That's a lot. We got to keep that number down. I mean, that is way too many penalties taken. I mean, how many is that? That's over 3 penalties a game, minimum. That's crazy. Some games we've even taken 6. So, that's pretty bad. But, like I said, not the biggest detriment to the team. It's the power play that's more of a detriment. We'll see how things turn out going forward. And to wrap up this video, I just wanted to conclude with the Kings' overall record. I actually should put this at the very beginning of the video, but I totally forgot about it. So, just to wrap it up, Kings' record through the first 20 games. The record is 10-7-3 with 2 overtime losses and 1 shootout loss. You guys can see the goals for 61 and goals against 55. And then, of course, I broke it down by home and away games, including West and East teams. So, as you guys can see, we are pretty much even. We are actually 6-6 wins and losses against the West, 4-4 wins and losses against the East. Granted, that's overtime and shootout losses included as well, but for the sake of wins and losses, it is even straight up. And you guys can see from the goals and goals against as well that, yes, overall we have more goals than goals against, both in the in the categories of West and East. However, if you guys look at the home and away section, we do have more. When I said 6-6 and 4-4, I was looking at the West and East teams. Home and away, that's a problem. Obviously, we've only won 2 more than home, but we've lost more on the road. Contrary to last year, where we actually won more on the road in the beginning of the season, including doing the NHL record for most road wins to start a season. What happened to that? All of a sudden, we're like one of the worst teams right now. So, obviously, these are just nitpicking stats, but the overall record shows that we are not a top-tier team right now. If you take all wins and losses considered, it is technically even, 10-10. 10 wins with 10 losses. 7 regulation, 2 overtime, and 1 shootout. So overall, the Kings' performance has not been there. As I mentioned multiple times now throughout my videos, and going back to the preseason and the summer, I don't expect the Kings to make the playoffs, especially not the way they're playing like this. This isn't good enough. I mean, half a season is 41 games. If you only win 41 games of the 82, that's what? 80 that's 82 points. 82 points does not get you into a playoff spot. So, the Kings need to pick it up and really start, getting those points. Last year we let a lot of 1-goal games go. I forget exactly how many, but it was a lot. It was probably at least 20. And so we don't want that to happen. The power play needs to improve now. PK needs to improve now. The first quarter is done. Let's put that behind us. We need to do better now. We usually do, the Kings, I should say, usually do really bad during the second quarter to third quarter stretch. The Christmas break / New Year break just destroys the Kings. I don't know what it is, but they just suck around this time of year. If we can turn that around, they'll be a way better team, and we wouldn't have to push ourselves so hard just to make the playoffs come the spring in the final quarter of the season and going into the playoffs. I'd rather be a team that has to, I'd rather have be a team that has the wins already, sealed our spot in the playoffs, maybe lose a couple games, but then go back in strong, winning, than having to claw our way back into the playoffs just so we get the wild card spot or something. And that's kind of what I expect to see from the Kings, a wild card spot this year. I just don't think we have the team to win the Stanley Cup. We may get in the playoffs, but we're not going to win it, unfortunately. That's just the way I see it. And especially without Doughty in the lineup, things just don't look so good. But that's just my opinion. This is the Kings' overall record, so as you guys can see, things need to improve, but overall, it's not like the worst case scenario. Obviously, as I mentioned in the very beginning, we're not in the bottom of the Western Conference or anything, but we could be better. And I think we can get better if the Kings try and, put a little bit more effort in and score more goals. So there you guys have it. That's the overall first quarter preview from the season for the 2024-25 season. And overall, I'm both satisfied and not satisfied. Obviously, I think I'm more on the unsatisfied part. As I mentioned before in my past videos, I'm not excited for Kings hockey as I was before. Granted, I am always watching the games. I watch all the games. I study the game. I watch other teams, how they're producing, what we should be doing, changing things up, looking into the player stats, seeing who's good, who's bad, things like that. Even for fantasy, I play hockey fantasy as well. And the Kings, unfortunately, just aren't doing it. They're just doing bad. They really need to pick up their pace a little bit more. Specifically, players like Fiala need to stay disciplined, need to score more. Kempe needs to score more on the power play, specifically on the power play. His production overall is okay, but he needs to score more goals. I mean, everyone thinks he's a top-tier forward on the Kings, but I personally don't see it. He was never meant to be, in my opinion, but he is now. That's the way he is now, so we have to deal with it. And then, of course, defensemen, Gavrikov, Clark, they need to step up their game and score more goals. If not, get more points, get on the plays more. And, overall, I think the Kings can do better, yes, but it's just a matter of effort, just like last year. It's just a matter of effort, putting in the effort to get those extra goals, to get those extra points. Who wants to be the hero? That's something I think the Kings lack. You see other teams, like for example, like the Toronto Maple Leafs. They got Austin Matthews, Mitch Marner, John Tavares, William Nylander. They can all be heroes in their own right. They can go out, get a goal on their own, no problem. Or like the Oilers, McDavid, Draisaitl. They can go and get a goal if they need it. The Kings, I just don't see it. I really don't see anyone who just wants to be a hero, who wants to push the team above and beyond. And that's also another reason why I think the leadership core is kind of lacking. Without Doughty in the lineup, Kobe's captain, but you don't see him going out his way to go and get a goal, right? He's going to be the guy who sets up the goal. Kempe, he's sharing time with with Mikey Anderson. I don't see it. There's no leadership there. There really isn't. And then, of course, Philip Deneau, he has the A as well. There's no leadership there. I just don't see the Kings going out of their way to make themselves look good. And, sure, young guys are a little bit too flashy nowadays, but people like Bedard, Zegras, Celebrini, all these young guys are coming into the league and are doing these flashy moves, flashy goals. They're doing things that are very unorthodox, but it gets it done, and it gets the teams their goals that they need to win games. Granted, yes, I get it. Celebrini and Bedard, my two examples, are on bottom teams, but my point is they are players who go out of their way to flash their stuff. They don't mind taking risks and getting the goals that actually matter. You don't see the Kings players doing that, and that's very unfortunate. We don't have any prospects. In fact, I don't think we've had a prospect come up since Sean Durzi. I think he's the only one to ever come up from Ontario and just straight up shine. Can't consider Blank Clark that because this is his first season, and first season doing, putting in points. All of his other seasons kind of sucked, even if it was only a few games. I don't know. I don't think there's anyone else in my knowledge here has done any better than Sean Durzi has from Ontario to Kings, yet alone from draft to NHL. Kings just don't have it. Byfield will be the next closest, but he's taken years to get to this point where he is now, where a comparison to last year, rather, I should say. So he doesn't beat out Sean Durzi's performance. So I am very disappointed to see that these players who we consider prospects, Kings once had one of the best prospect pools in the league, and all of a sudden, I don't see it. None of them are good. And that's a huge problem. Not to mention, again, I'm going to mention it over and over again, we let players like them walk. Sean Durzi went to Utah, obviously got a big contract, deservingly so. He was better than all the defensemen on our team right now, except for Doughty, who is injured. And then we got Brock Faber. He was in Ontario, and we let him go to Minnesota. What the heck? He's all of a sudden Minnesota's number one defenseman right now. Why did we do that last year? I don't know. Why didn't we just bring him up and send someone else away? It sucks. I don't know why the Kings do that. So on and so forth. I could go on for a couple more guys, but my point is these young guys need to come in and take over. Unfortunately, they are not doing that job, and therefore, people who say the Kings prospect pool is great, I think you're 100% wrong, and you're crazy. I'm just not seeing it. The Kings prospects are just not getting it done, and unfortunately, the veterans aren't either. And unless this changes going forward, Kings aren't going to win games. And so, with that ends my first quarter season review for the 2024 season, 2024-25 season, I should say specifically. Kings could do better, but so can everyone else. So we'll see how things go going forward. But like I said, I do believe they can improve. It's just little things here and there that needs to be fixed. But at the same time, it's typical Kings stuff, and I'm not going to be surprised if we continue to just stay average, if not go downhill. Again, losing Doughty was probably the biggest thing going into the season. The fact that he is out as our number one D, with the D core that we have, it's just crazy. Yeah. In any case, I digress. That's it for this one. Thank you guys for watching. If you guys watched it all the way through, if you enjoyed this video, hit the like button, comment down below what you guys thought, and subscribe to the channel if you haven't already. Let me know, do you guys agree with what I had to say? Do you guys disagree with anything I had to say? Please let me know in the comment section. Again, I'm just a fan. I don't do this for a job. I don't do this professionally. It's just my opinions, but I do watch practically every single game, and I watch other games as well, outside of the Kings, and I do think other teams have it going where the Kings do not. There's things that the Kings need to maybe go out and look at other teams and see how they're doing it and do the same exact thing. I get it. No player is exactly the same as another, but there are team comparisons that we can do, to improve our team right now. And unfortunately, I don't think the Kings are doing that at all. But that's just my opinion. So let me know. Otherwise, that's it for now. Thank you guys for watching. Hope you guys have a great day. Go Kings go for tonight's game against... I forget who we're playing, but my review is coming out today, Saturday, so as you guys know that. But yeah, this recording has been over the past couple days. Sorry, it's a late recording, but it takes time to get this stuff out. So thank you guys for watching. Have a great day, and I'll see you guys in the next one. Bye-bye.